Hey, welcome to my YouTube channel, Men's Mental Health. I'm your host, Dr. Daniel Bates, and today I'm going to get into a really interesting conversation about an important part of men's mental health. And specifically, we're going to look at the motivations behind men's avoidance of help seeking.
Men who are struggling will often take that pain and that hurt and turn it inwards. Drinking too much, working too much, self-isolating.
Now, I think she's raising a really good point, but I wouldn't describe that as internalizing. I would describe that actually as externalizing. Men are experiencing internal distress, psychological pain, suffering, grief, loss, loneliness, the whole gamut of the human experience, and they're hurting. Rather than deal with that internal experience through internal solutions, men reach out for external sources to produce something internal. I'll reach out for alcohol, drugs, sports betting and gambling. I'll go to a hyper focus, a hobby, woodworking, cars. I'll go to some kind of external distraction, some external soothing in the hopes that it will change my internal state. The problem with that, though, is those external things just distract me for a moment. They help me avoid the problem for a temporary period, but they're not producing that internal change that I need.
This is because they would rather destroy themselves than to be a burden on someone else.
Okay, she's touching on a really good point here. I think men don't want to be a burden. Men don't want to bother other people with their problems and their emotions and their feelings. And I think it's because men have internalized, now we're using the word appropriately, men have internalized these messages from culture that their problems and their feelings are inconsequential, that they don't matter, and that if a man has a problem, he's just whining or complaining. So no man could ever really have a legitimate struggle or problem. Now, that's what we get from culture, but also men are kind of ruthless with each other. We police each other on being manly and masculine. And part of those ideas about being masculine come with these beliefs about problem solving on your own, not seeking help, coming up with your own solutions to your own problems, being strong, stuffing down emotions. And men, we're kind of policing each other on that standard. And we punish each other if any man steps out of line and says, "Hey, I'm actually struggling and I have a problem." We immediately label that man as weak and not manly. He's failing in some kind of important measure of manhood. And so then men just stuff those emotions. I always say this to patients: you are as sick as your secrets. Those problems, when hidden and in the darkness, tend to fester and get worse over time. They don't get better. Sometimes I use the analogy of putting a dirty dish in the sink. I put the dirty dish in the sink and I kind of forget it's there. I don't think about it anymore. But then I do that over and over and over again, and those dishes start to pile up until they come crashing down. So men will either explode or they shut down. But sometimes when men go into a rage and they explode with anger, it's because they've been ignoring so many issues that it just takes one straw to break the camel's back and just everything comes out in a huge flood of self-destructive rage and anger. And that tends to hurt them and tends to hurt others. And then men feel really bad and guilty. I'm not opening up ever again. That was too embarrassing. That was too vulnerable.
To hurt someone else. None of these men want to keep these behaviors, but because they don't have the resources or the skill set, or they just haven't figured out how to step out of it yet, they feel stuck.
It's about a lack of resources. It's about a lack of knowledge. It's about a lack of understanding. I think if you give men the knowledge, the resources, and the understanding, men want to be better. Men don't want to harm themselves and harm others. So, in my mind, it's about how do we come alongside men and support them and equip them to live a meaningful life, to live a life that they want to live, to let them be their best selves.
Because they feel stuck, they feel ashamed, because they feel like as a man, they're supposed to have all of the answers or else they're a failure.
As a man, I have to have all the answers. And I've had my research participants describe like a male ego, where I want to have this status that I'm super capable, really strong, and nothing ever bothers me. And I think men will make choices to protect their ego above their mental health and above their relationships and above their physical health. And we have got to stop this. it's not working. It is not a sign of weakness to ask for help and to admit to a problem. If anything, it is a sign of strength to do that because once I ask for that help, that's when I get the support, the resources, the knowledge, the skills to be better. And I can then make choices that serve me and serve those around me. And one thing I say to men is, you can't pour from an empty cup. You have got to pour into yourself just a little bit so you can start to pour into others. Isn't that ultimately what you want? To care for those around you, to provide for them, to protect them? Well, how do you do that when you've got a thorn in your side? You're bleeding out, you've got a wound and it's festering, and you won't attend to the problem.
So if you're a man or you're with a man who is struggling, make sure you create a space that says it's okay for you not to have all the answers and watch how his life changes.
I'm talking to the wives, the female partners. I'm talking to friends, fathers, brothers, sons, anyone who is connected to a man who you know is struggling but won't ask for help and won't admit it. You have to create some psychological safety for that man to open up. You have to get on his level. You have to connect with him. You have to let him know there's no judgment and to create that psychological safety, not in a forced way, not like he's coerced, but in an invitational way. Hey, it's okay to talk about this and get help and support. So I think that last point is potentially the most important part. How do you create that environment to help a man feel comfortable, like he's not going to lose his man card if he talks about a real issue, but he can be open and honest and really disclose what's going on, and then he can be open to input. Thanks for watching, and please like, subscribe, and comment. Any support on this channel really helps me and helps me get these messages out to more men.